yeah, I come from an evangelical culture and background. Was a child of the 90s, so I was raised in purity culture. Since 2008, I haven't been a single issue voter and have had no problem voting for the candidate that I just felt aligned most with my social values, which tends to be more liberal candidates. And so this hasn't been, it hasn't been a really hard road for me to vote a different way. But I did start to speculate in the last few years as I've deconstructed purity culture. I started to see parallels with the anti-abortion and pro-life movements and their focus on the female body and their focus on putting kind of blame and shame, it seems, on the female body instead of elsewhere in the purity culture movement. The way that it was taught to me was that it was my job as a woman to keep my brothers in Christ pure. It was my job. It was my responsibility if they weren't pure, and it was my responsibility to keep myself pure. So there was just kind of this focus on the female body being the thing that leads men to not be pure, having to keep myself pure. And so I used the work of a literary theorist, Renee Girard, who talks about the scapegoat theory, and kind of found the female body to be at the center of that theory for evangelicals. And the scapegoat theory is it's really strong. It's something that communities rally around, something that goes way back to tribal times, and it's a little much to talk about in a minute. But I started to see parallels there, and I wondered, I wonder if some evangelicals are rallying around this thing as a way to keep them together, as something that they feel like they need to stay strong, to stay powerful. And if there is another way, if evangelicals, were able to vote a different way and let go of this need or this fear around control and power. So that's how I kind of came into the conversation, though I feel like I'm still very much learning, very much, still finding my way through all of this, but I definitely understand it as a very nuanced thing. And there's a story behind every woman who has to make a choice like this. And I don't pretend to know what's best for her is kind of where I've landed. Purity culture, tells women the worst sin you can commit is sex outside of marriage. If you have evidence that you have done that, it will drive you to have an abortion, or will drive you to hide in shame. And I think that we have to ask ourselves, why has this become the greatest sin? Why has this become the center of conversation in youth groups and what we teach? And I think that it is what has caused me to think, there's something rotten in the state of evangelical political affiliations with being pro-life. It just seems like there's something kind of under the surface that has to do with how we talk about and treat and think about the female body, which is often as an object, which is often as a temptation, which is not fully human. And Lisa, I believe you talked about, fully humanizing this issue. And I feel like if we could fully humanize women, this conversation would be completely different. It'd be a lot less about the woman in her body. We'd be talking more about men and why men aren't wearing condoms. Sorry if that's a little bit too crass to say. But it does seem like to be a big thing that we're not talking about. When men talk about abortion, I was on a podcast recently with a friend and writer named Debbie, and she talked about just how it rubbed her the wrong way when men would talk about abortion, because it was talking about something that seemed so apart from them. And I thought, I would listen to a man talk about abortion if he was talking about, men not using protection and not doing what their part of all of this. And so that's what made me really suspicious that there's this whole conversation we're not having. It's just about the woman. It's just about her body. And this is connected, I think, with purity culture and just how women are talked about and treated in the church.